Radiant and Resilient is about mindset and faith to break paradigms and overcome challenges in our life. Because when the mind, body, and spirit are aligned, we literally radiate from the inside out. I'm Kay Vasquez. Let's dive in. As I record this episode, I am currently 27 weeks pregnant. So as I am about to enter the third trimester, it is standard protocol for women to complete the glucose test to check for gestational diabetes. So I really want to share my thoughts and perspective about this because I have a background as a physician assistant in Western medicine, as well as functional medicine. And for me, I chose to actually decline the glucose test. One, because I'm very low risk. Yes, I am over the age of 35 with my first pregnancy, and in Western medicine, they call this advanced maternal age. So with that, supposedly comes with risk factors. But I told my OB, I told my midwife when I first saw them, I'm going to be the easiest patient you have because I am so intentional with my health. I focus on eating whole foods. I'm not perfect 100% of the time. Yes, I may have some processed food and some sugar here and there. I'd say about 90% of the time I am focused on good quality food, whole foods, organic foods, etc. I'm also very active. I prioritize my sleep. I do things to really help reduce stress in the body. So I'm very intentional and mindful when it comes to my health, and my risk is really, really low. But there's a lot of women that aren't aware of alternatives when it comes to the glucose test. And so that's what I really want to share because I put up a post the other day that I was starting a continuous glucose monitor. So I have a continuous glucose monitor on my arm that I'm using to track my glucose levels for a week. And I want to bring awareness that this is an option. It probably wasn't an option back in the day, especially before the monitors were invented. And when they were created, it was specifically for people that actually had diabetes. But medicine is changing. Medicine is coming a long way. When I jumped into functional medicine, started to use continuous glucose monitoring on my clients. I used it for myself just to get an overall perspective on my health. And what are some tweaks and changes I need to make? Because if you think about it, if the root cause of diabetes, and if you actually dive into research and literature, other chronic disorders like heart disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. A lot of it is poor glucose regulation, poor metabolism. And so, unfortunately, Western medicine, when they do preventative testing, they just look at your fasting glucose, but they don't actually look at what people are eating. They're not using a continuous glucose monitor to actually see their body's response. So to me, that just makes sense. But Western medicine is a little outdated, they're not with the times. And I hope that Western medicine starts to catch on and use continuous glucose monitoring as a preventative measure, not when someone actually has diabetes or in pregnancy, gestational diabetes, right? Or some women with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a metabolic disorder that causes a hormonal imbalance. So in functional medicine, I started using CGMs with my clients, which was eye-opening because it really helped them to make tweaks with what they're eating to improve not only their energy, help them lose weight, but also to improve the quality of sleep at night. So something as simple as just checking your glucose and noticing that it's dipping in the middle of the night, we can make some tweaks to keep your glucose regular and help improve your sleep. And so it's not just for people with diabetes. No, this is a preventative measure. That's why having the background that I have, I was very firm in my decision declining the glucose test because my risk factors are very, very low. I'm very intentional. I watch what I eat. I've used continuous glucose monitors before, so I understand how my body responds to specific foods. So to give them ease of mind, to show them that I am low risk for gestational diabetes, I'm like, let me just do the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor. And it's so interesting because when I shared on Instagram that I am using the CGM, I had so many women reaching out wishing that they had this as an option because one, they weren't even aware this was even an option. And there were some women that, even though it wasn't an option, had refused the glucose test because they also were on the same page as me. Because what I shared in the post was that it just doesn't make sense to me to drink a drink. So the glucose drink is pure straight sugar, it's glucose. And it's about 50, can be anywhere from 50 to 100 grams of sugar, which is a lot of sugar, especially at one time. And the recommended dietary amount that women should be taking in per day is only 25 grams, so half the amount. And so to me, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm very intentional. I purposely don't eat a lot of sugar in a day. And yes, I may have some here and there, but I'm so intentional with the amount that I take in that to me, it just didn't make sense to load my body with all this sugar just so I can see how my body responds. Instead, I prefer to use the continuous glucose monitor. So when I eat, I can actually physically see the response after eating and make tweaks. And so in the past, when I've done this, I know fruit, especially pineapple, can spike my glucose levels. And so I typically will pair fruit with almond butter or with some nuts because nuts, they have healthy fats, healthy fiber, source of protein, and it helps to stabilize our glucose. So with that understanding, I can make the tweaks necessary to keep my glucose levels from spiking. So there's specific foods that can spike our glucose. Also, back in the day, I didn't know. I used to eat oatmeal because I thought oatmeal's healthy, right? Oatmeal's a whole grain, great source of fiber. And I didn't realize like how much it was spiking my glucose. Even when I added almond butter, chia, hemp, flax seeds, cinnamon into my oatmeal and loaded it with some berries that are low in sugar, it still spiked my glucose. So I stopped eating the oatmeal and haven't eaten oatmeal for a couple years now and switched to more savory breakfasts that are heavier and that have more healthy fats and protein and fiber with a little bit of carbs, but more complex carbs instead of quick burning carbs. Because of the CGM, I definitely have made tweaks and changes because I also have a family history of diabetes. So I've used it in the past just for overall health. And thankfully, there's no family history of gestational diabetes. I know my risk is low, but using the CGM is such a powerful tool. I want to let you know that there are a couple alternatives and options. So if you are currently pregnant or you know someone who's pregnant, share this episode with them because, again, I want to bring awareness that there are other options instead of drinking the glucose test. Now, I also get there's a time and place, especially if you're higher risk, you may have to go this route. There's a company called the Fresh Test, which is a little bit healthier option. Still, it's a lot of sugar. It's, sugar loading into your system to see your body's response. But that would be a better option than, what they provide in Western medicine. But ultimately, if you can get your provider on board, your midwife, your OB, whoever you're seeing, to get a continuous glucose monitor or work with a functional medicine practitioner who can get you the monitor. And ultimately, you want to work with someone who not only is able to get you the CGM, but who also understands how to read it, because that's also key and important. Who understands how to read it to help you make the tweak. There's a couple different companies out there. There's Levels, there's NutriSense, there's Very, there's Thea Health. I personally have used Very and Thea Health. So I will add the link because I'm currently using Thea Health at the time this podcast is released. So I will add the link. If this is something you're interested, you're more than welcome to purchase the sensors through Thea Health. And they have an incredible app where you can log your food. You can see the glucose, how your body responds after eating specific meals. It gives you scores. So it lets you know a score after each meal and a total daily score. But it's also important to work with someone who can read this because say your glucose spikes, you want to work with someone to help you make little tweaks and changes. So if you eat that same food again, you know what to do to help regulate that glucose response. Because what I always tell my clients, we don't want to see mountains and valleys. We want to see nice rolling hills when it comes to our glucose levels. And we don't want to see more than a 30-point spike because that's not good. That means that's just too much sugar, too many carbs that you're introducing into your body at once, which if you're constantly doing that on a daily, regular basis, that can set you up for like prediabetes, or if you're pregnant, gestational diabetes, or other metabolic disorders like PCOS. So it's important to work with a practitioner. Because yes, you can monitor on your own, but if you don't have the understanding, you're not going to know what to do. And sometimes an OB or a midwife is also not going to have that understanding and may want to put you on medication. For example, they see higher levels of glucose, when we can improve your glucose levels by just tweaking what you're eating, making adjustments, and maybe reducing carbs or switching out carbs or adding more protein, adding more fats, depending on what you're eating. And that's really the key. Because for me, I'm like, well, when it comes to gestational diabetes or even diabetes in general, most of the time it can be prevented. It can be prevented based off of what we're eating. And so that's why I encourage you to be an advocate for yourself. See if you can get a continuous glucose monitor, because it just makes sense. Let's monitor your glucose and your response, your body's response to the foods that you're eating, and how well you are regulating your glucose levels. Because if it can be prevented and we can make the tweaks, we can optimize your health and longevity during your pregnancy and the health of your baby, and not just during pregnancy, but long term. And that's what makes sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to drink this test when no one's even looking at what you're eating, looking at your body's response to specific foods that you eat on a regular daily basis, instead of just loading your body with all this sugar. And to me, I had this thought, I'm like, I wonder how many women actually do the test have false positives, especially if their body's not used to taking in that amount. Yeah, you're going to have a huge spike. Granted, I'm sure there are women that actually truly have poor glucose dysregulation where they're not able to regulate, and there is a huge spike anyway, no matter how much sugar they take in. But it's so important that we're taking more preventative measures. We're actually looking at the body's response, to the foods that we eat, and continuous glucose monitor is the way. It is the way. So I want to bring awareness to this, because I'm sure there's so many women out there that don't know. And if you're not aware, one, I want you to become aware. Or two, if you are aware, but you know people who aren't aware, like I said, share this episode with them so we can start to bring that awareness. And when it comes to our health, we have to be an advocate for ourselves. Western medicine isn't the end all be all. And if anything, I've learned one way of doing things, but looking at things from a functional medicine perspective, I started to question certain things that Western medicine is doing, and within reason, right? Because if we're healthy and we have the data to back it up, it just makes sense, right? So I just wanted to share that with you, because CGM has been a game changer for myself. It's been a game changer for my clients, whether they're pregnant or not, just to optimize their health, their vitality, longevity. And if this is something you're interested in, like I said, I have a link to Thea Health, so you can check them out. They have an incredible app which gives you some data, some metrics. But like I said, most importantly, it's so important that you reach out and work with a practitioner. So if you're interested in diving in deep, want to learn more, book a connection call with me. In the meantime, definitely stay tuned, because there are going to be more episodes to come regarding health, mindset, faith, anything just to help increase our radiance. Because, when we can focus on healing the body, supporting the body, optimizing our health, as well as the mind and the spirit, we literally are radiant. We become radiant from the inside out. So stay tuned for more.